All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. And on this edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast, I have the privilege of having the man, the myth, the legend. Any other adjective that you want to use to describe him is good, it fits. And I'm talking about the one and only Ernest Dancy. Ernest, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Will. It's always a fun time when you and I connect and we talk NBA basketball.
You already know, man. Listen, the season's right around the corner. I think that we are in store for a lot of fun-filled action. We've seen the moves that went down over the summer, some of the shocking moves that happened just before the start of the season. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But of course, tonight we're going to do something a little bit different this time around because we've talked about this among ourselves, and it's a hot topic that has been on for some time now. It ain't going away, and it's the old school NBA versus new school NBA, new school NBA versus old school NBA. Any way you want to slice it, but there is clearly a divide between, generations as far as, talented players. I'm not a fan of it. I'm really not. It's unfortunate. I think, there is a respect issue there, from whatever way that people want to view it as, whether they feel like the new school guys are not respecting the old school guys, the old school guys are not respecting the new school guys, depending on which way that you're coming at it from. But it's a divide and it's truly unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's uncalled for as well. Because if you would take somebody like let's just say for instance George Gervin, the Iceman, right? No matter what era you put the Iceman in, he's going to average at least 20 points per game. At the very least, he's going to average that. No matter what era you put Wilt in or Shaq in, they're going to do their numbers. And Wilt and Shaq, specifically, they may do even more numbers now because you can't touch anybody. And all of the other big men are so used to not only launching up a whole bunch of threes, but since the other dominant big men shoot a lot of threes, they're not used to playing solid post defense. So they're going to get killed down there. So yeah, very interesting. It's crazy. I don't like it. It's weird to me.
Listen, I think first and foremost, I think some of it is media generated, and I go back several years ago, probably around the pandemic when the whole, Jordan LeBron debate started. And I felt like, and I still feel like it's maybe one of the dumbest arguments that people want to have because A, it's two different eras of basketball. B, there is nothing similar to the games of LeBron James and Michael Jordan. Two great players in their own right, but it's like saying, okay, what do you enjoy having more, steak or grits? It's like it's two great foods that, depending on which way you want to come at it from, but they don't go together. And it's like now you see it, in different aspects. I think back, to Ant-Man over the summer, who Ant-Man is on the come up, but trying to like be disrespectful, basically saying that, outside of Michael Jordan, there's really nobody, from the old school that and I'm paraphrasing here for a minute, but there's really nobody that he looks at like that. But I'm like, Mike, if you're looking at the 80s and 90s, Mike was not the only guy that got busy. And of course, like anything else, you have to study the game. Okay. And I'm not trying to sound like an older guy, like, oh, get off my lawn or whatever like that. But no, it's kind of like, you have to understand who came before you and who paved the way because you could sit up there and make the comments and say, well, oh, these guys were nothing but plumbers, which I think was, you know,
Ridiculous by JJ Redick.
E- e-
Ridiculous.
Exactly. Okay, but you know what? These guys played in high school gyms in some cases. There were no, charter flights. You had to take care of your own uniform, travel. You were on a bus or a train. You were playing in
There
Chuck
was no
Taylor.
3-point line.
No, but these guys hooped, and it wasn't, you didn't hear all of this, okay, this guy's a two-way player, this, that, and the third. You had to play D regardless of the position. And most importantly for me, these guys showed up each and every single 80 of the 82 games of the regular season and the playoffs. I think back to when the Knicks lost to the Rockets in 94 in the finals. I think that year the Knicks played 110 games because they a lot of those series they had three straight game sevens in the playoffs that year. Bulls in the second round, Pacers conference finals, Rockets in the NBA finals. Of those 110 games, Charles Oakley played 109. And it
It
wasn't
was a badge of honor. Availability was a badge of honor back then.
right. And it's like, to me, I think that's a reason why you saw guys finishing their careers 34, 35 years of age. Very rarely would you have a guy sneak in, maybe like a Robert Parrish, to like he was 40. You know what I mean?
Correct.
And Robert Parrish took his conditioning very serious because he learned from Nate Thurman early on in his career because Robert Parrish got started with the Golden State Warriors. A lot of people don't know that. But it's one of those where that's why, you didn't see guys extending their careers like it is now. And it's
Hey,
one,
look at Larry Bird. Case in point, two
right.
guys who were on the same team, right? Parrish played like 20 years. But what people don't realize, Bird really did not play that long.
He
He
didn't.
really didn't
He
because
didn't.
that back went out. And he said it himself. Some of the vets used to tell him, hey, Larry, you can't be running during the summer like you do because what most people don't know is the fact that Larry Bird took his conditioning very seriously. He ran a lot during the summer. He ran a lot of miles. And they would tell him, Larry, that's going to shorten your career. During the summer, not only should you not be playing basketball, but you should not be running the way
Right.
that you're running. And Larry's argument was, okay, it might shorten my career, but in order for me to play 82 games at the level in which I play, in order for me to be able to hoop effectively against the likes of a Dominique Wilkins, like this is what I have to do during the summer. So
Right.
yeah, you're absolutely right. They gave it their all. Hence why most of them could not play 15, 16 years.
And honestly, I have no problem with that because
No.
my whole thing is this, is like, listen, I think we've all been fans of basketball for a long time. And regardless of like, listen, I still remember my first ever NBA game. I was in high school, and it was one of those where the guys that I saw on the court that night, whoever was advertised on the marquee to play, they were going to show up to play. There was nothing in the 1980s, whereas if CBS had marketed all week long, hey, you're going to see Celtics Lakers Sunday afternoon. You knew when you sat down in front of your TV and you put that game on, you were going to see Larry, you were going to see Magic, and they were going at it. It was the same thing in the 90s. If it was Knicks Bulls, you knew right off the bat you were going to see Mike and you were going to see Patrick Ewing, and we could
Yep.
go right down the list. It wasn't any of this, load management. It wasn't any of this. I don't want to play. And I think, and again, I'm not trying to sound like the old man get off my lawn, but listen, you guys that are making 40, 50, 60 million dollars a year now playing basketball, it's because of these guys. Because listen, they built it for you. Okay, they paved the way for you. And it's like, not playing and then all of this, not acknowledging the the older generation. And it's kind of like if somebody is critical about what you're saying about your game or something like that because they came from a different era, oh, they're a hater. And I'm like, you
It's
know,
like, no, they're just telling you what they're observing and what they see.
Listen, I mean, and I'm gonna turn it right back over to you very quickly. I think back to a story I heard, two stories I heard from Shaquille O'Neal. He talked about, his first several years with the Lakers before Phil Jackson came into the fold. And he said he was in a room with Kareem and somebody mentioned to Kareem, pointing to Shaq, like, oh, he's going to be one of the greatest Lakers ever. And Kareem was like, no, he's not because he hasn't won anything. Why? Because Utah and San Antonio were getting him up out of the playoffs every single year easily. You know what I'm saying? Shaq took that to heart and said, you know what? I got to get better. You go to the modern game, even a guy like Shaq, one of the 50th greatest players, 75 greatest players, one of the best bigs ever. Okay.
Ever.
Four-time NBA champion, finals MVP, 2000 NBA MVP, you name it. Shaq will get critical with guys and they want to start questioning Shaq's career. And I'm like, listen, Shaq Diesel, and I don't think, people really remember how dominant that Shaquille was for like a good 12 or 13 years. Okay, it wasn't until that championship with Miami that he started like the decline. But the Orlando years, the LA years, you were not stopping him. I mean, you think about the whole Hack a Shaq and then even that 2001 NBA Finals. Dikembe Mutombo, arguably one of the best defensive centers ever. Dikembe had
God rest his soul.
God rest his
God
soul,
rest his
but
soul.
he had no answer for Shaq. Okay, so that just gives you an idea of how dominant it was,
Like
man.
Shaq says, Dikembe was barbecue chicken.
Listen, go to the tape. I'll listen. Go to YouTube. Okay, and then you look at the Dikembe's NBA career and how he dominated the paint. But in those 5 games in that series, he didn't. I mean, it was like Dikembe gave it all he had, and Shaq still ended up averaging like 30 or 15.
Yeah, it didn't matter. It was almost like Dikembe wasn't even there.
Right. And it's just, to me, it's the gap. It's like you have to acknowledge and respect and understand the guys that paved the way for you. And it's kind of like some of them, they look at dudes like, oh, if you didn't win a championship, like, oh, you don't count. And it's like I had this conversation with like a friend of mine. We were talking football. It's the video game culture because it's like, listen, you played in our day, you played NBA Live. Okay, there was no
Mhm.
2K.
Yep,
All right. But it's kind of like, the video game culture has like made people feel like, oh, winning championships are easy. They are not. I mean, how many people do we know who lost to the computer in the NBA Live and hit reset because they didn't want to take that L?
that's true.
It doesn't work like that in real
Yeah, yep, yep. That is very true. And like you said, it does not work like that in real life.
Yeah, and like for me, you look at it now, and I'll definitely turn this over to you right now. I feel like, and I think it's media driven as well. I feel like this GOAT conversation is just watered down because it's like I feel like people, use the greatest of all time term too much, too often. Oh, who's a GOAT? Who's a GOAT to this position? Who's a GOAT to this team? X, Y, and Z. I feel like it's so difficult when you use that term because I feel like of all of the players who have played in the NBA now for nearly 80 years, okay, there's probably like a handful of guys, past and present, that you can put in that conversation. And again, it's so difficult because of different positions. And for me, this is the thing that people have to realize. It's different eras. It's like, you think back to the NBA before there was hand checking. You think back to the NBA when there was more physicality. And the problem is like a lot of the new cats, you use the term physicality and they want to like check on clickbait videos where like maybe like where Kevin McHale clothesline Kurt Rambis. That was a one
Hmm.
that was a one-off scenario. And it's like even as physical as the Detroit Pistons were, they still had to go out there and play basketball in order to win championships.
Yeah,
Okay.
they had to execute. There
Right,
had to be talent there.
right. And it's like I feel like, people have just taken this GOAT conversation and just watered it down.
Yeah, they really have. And GOAT, right? Greatest of all time. Not multiple people being quote unquote goaded. Oh, he's goaded. He's one of the goats. Great. Just the definition. It's only there can only be one, right? So there were different people at different points in time, like during the game, right? At one time, it was Wilt, right? And then Kareem took over because he won at literally every level of basketball. He was the best at every level: high school, college, NBA,
Yep.
right? And then it was Jordan. Now, I still have not seen anyone take it from Jordan. And that is not LeBron's fault. LeBron is not greater than Michael Jordan. Now, did he move up on that list? I do believe he moved up from number 3 to number 2. I believe that is Michael Jordan, the greatest of all time. Second place is LeBron, and then Kareem, and then so on and so forth, right? But there can't be a whole bunch of GOATs. There's only one. And that is no shade on LeBron James because we've never seen anything like LeBron. And we've never ever seen, I guess, besides Tom Brady and the great one, uh,
Wayne Gretzky.
Wayne Gretzky, right?
Mhm.
We've never seen anybody so great for so long.
Right.
Like, this is crazy. That's a whole other conversation. And it's like, why don't people just allow LeBron? And why doesn't he allow himself also to be appreciated for what he is and for what he's in uncharted territory. He
Right.
even showed it in the Olympics. Like, dude, besides Steph Curry's exploits the last 2 games of the Olympics, LeBron was the best player on a team full of the best players in the world. And he was hands down the best player. It's like, how are you doing this? And he should be appreciated for that. He's just not greater than Michael Jordan. And that's okay.
I think when it's all said and done, because I'm sure like there are plenty of fans right now that do appreciate LeBron and his contributions to the game. I think he's going to fall in that category like everybody else. You are not going to fully appreciate him until he's not playing anymore and he's showing up to games as a spectator. It happens all the time.
Just
Okay,
like with Kobe.
yeah, I mean, you look at Kobe. I mean, you think about Michael Jordan for an example. The Chicago Bulls have only made the Eastern Conference Finals once since Michael Jordan stopped playing for that team. That's more than 25 years ago.
See?
Okay. And whereas, when Mike was on top, okay, getting to at least the Eastern Conference Finals was a given. Even before he got to that championship level, I think he got there in 90 when they lost to the Pistons, and I think the Pistons got them out of there. I think it was the second round in 89. And staying with Michael Jordan, I have never, and please feel free to, chime in if you disagree with me. I have never seen a great player, regardless of the sport that he or she played in, that has been disrespected at the level of Michael Jordan. And I bring this up because you hear people, like some people all the time, oh, they want to question the competition that Michael Jordan faced. Oh, they want to question this. Oh, they want to question that. And I'm like, listen, you figure the man came in, he was the third overall pick in 84. Okay. He was finally out of a system where Dean Smith, the great Dean Smith, had the reins on him. And he wanted to show what he could do. Average 37 points per game in an era of NBA basketball when there was hand checking. You go back to the 80, 86 playoffs. People forget Mike only played, I think, like 10 games that year, and he came back for the postseason because I know the Bulls were like easily like 15 games on the 500, and they lost to the Celtics in that first round series. And of course, that's when Mike put on, I think he had 62 points in game
And
two.
what did Bird say? And what
Right.
did Bird say?
Yeah, and it's like you think about that game right there. How many different guys did they put on Mike? They put Bird on him. They put McHale. They put Dennis Johnson, Danny Ainge. Nobody could stop the guy. And, after that, Mike started to like, build and build and get better. People
And
wanted to,
Larry Bird said something to the effect of that was God wearing basketball shoes.
yeah. Listen, I mean, you think about it. This guy was first team all defense darn near every year of the 1990s. He was a defensive player of the year. I think he was the last guard to be defensive player of the year if I'm not
No,
mistaken.
Marcus Smart won it.
Marcus Smart. Okay, I take that back.
Marcus Smart. Did GP win one?
I think Gary Payton may have gotten
Yeah,
it.
I think GP won one.
Okay. So I do take that back. But still, he was a defensive player of the year, five-time NBA MVP, six-time Finals MVP, and Mike was one of those guys where he wanted to score 40 on you, and he wanted to limit you to
To
four.
10.
I
Yeah.
say I say four because he wanted to like diminish you to the point that like you thought twice before you had to check him because I always think about the Byron Scott story and Byron Scott told the story like the last year of his first run with the Lakers and they were playing the Bulls at the Forum and he wasn't able to go because he had an injury. Okay, so he saw when he was leaving to go home to get dressed, and the Bulls bus was pulling up to the arena, and he saw Mike, and Mike showed him love, said what's up, and he was like, "You gonna be able to go tonight?" He was like, "I don't know." So long story short, Mike asked him who's guarding him, and he said Anthony Pillar. And Mike's eyes lit up and said the rookie, and he was like 50. And basically, when the game was over, Mike dropped 55, and he looked at Byron Scott and said, "I told you." You know,
See, see that competitiveness. He terrorized the NBA. And you can even ask players today, they say, yeah, for all of LeBron's greatness, none of us fear him. That's saying something. People feared Shaq. They were drafting people like Olawakandi for the Clippers. They were picking people like him with the number one overall pick just for their size alone to have someone big to throw at Shaq. Like things like that because they feared them. You didn't want your mother watching the game when you went up against guys like this. Larry Bird walking into now. This is also why what Anthony Edwards and I really love his game. He's a superstar, right? This is why what he said made absolutely no sense. How can Mike be the only skilled player from those eras, right? Where we had Pete Maravich in like the 70s, right? Pete Maravich could have did exactly what he was doing then in today's game, but with more freedom, way more freedom. He could have shot the three anytime he wanted off of any dribble combination his artistic mind could have imagined. Very few
Doc,
people have a better handle than Pete Maravich, right?
Dr. J was another one.
Yeah, come on. Larry Bird. It's like, did we forget about Larry Bird? Kevin Durant. And I think that Kevin Durant personally is the most dynamic scorer I've ever seen. I think Shaq is the most dominant player I've ever seen. I think Michael Jordan is the greatest player of all time. I think that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has the most devastating, unstoppable shot ever created. I think that Dirk Nowitzki's step back, one-footed fadeaway is
Tough,
one of the
tough,
greatest
tough.
weapons in modern basketball that regardless of position, you incorporate into your game because you can easily get that shot off, right? There's a whole bunch of different things. How can Anthony Edwards say Michael Jordan was the only skilled player back then, right? So now let's bring it back to what I was saying about Larry Bird. Demoralizing people, a straight monster, someone who wanted to destroy you. He went into the Atlanta Hawks locker room with Dominique sitting there, Dominique Wilkins. Vince Carter is getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, right? Vince Carter, in my opinion, was supposed to be the upgraded version of Dominique. He is not the next, he was not like Michael Jordan. They just went to UNC. He was supposed to be the upgraded version of Dominique Wilkins. He did not reach those heights. He didn't reach it. Bird went into their locker room and said, I'm giving y'all 50. Dominique was sitting right there. And he was saying, yo, when he said that, it's like, oh my God, it's going to be a long night. This is Dominique Wilkins.
And see, the younger, to your point right there, the younger generation doesn't understand how bad that man was. Why? Because he never won a championship. And people got to realize it's different levels to it.
It's different levels. He was playing in an era with Bird, Magic, Mike,
Isaiah,
Isaiah. Everybody's not going to win a championship.
no, no, and it's like, I mean, you look at Reggie. Reggie and the Pacers, they fought, scrapped, and clawed, and by the time that they got to the finals, they were an old team that ran into an unstoppable Shaq and Kobe.
Come
Okay,
on.
and
Come
Kobe
on.
and Kobe was another one of those guys because Kobe, you could see that as a kid, he watched that Come Fly With Me Michael Jordan tape religiously. Okay,
Yes.
and it's like that dude put like this. If Mike had trademarked like some of his moves, Kobe would have owed him like
Kobe
so.
would have been in court getting sued.
It's one of those things, but it's just like again, Kobe, Kobe just had that mentality where he just eat, sleep, slept, and breathe basketball. You know what I'm saying? And it's the mindset. We see dudes nowadays, not everybody, okay? This is why I give props to Ant-Man because a lot of these dudes, they have that buddy buddy mentality. It's like, oh, let's team up, let me hang out with my boys and, X, Y, Z. But on top of that, a lot of these dudes nowadays, they're not coachable. Okay, they're really not. Okay, it's like I think back to some of my coaches. When I played sports, and was I great enough to be a pro athlete? Absolutely not. But it's one of those where like, listen, they would tell you like, listen, if you ain't doing this or you ain't doing that, you're not gonna play for me. You know what I'm saying? And it's like it wasn't, oh, let me try to go to another school or let me just take my ball and go home, one of those type things. No, listen, you had to get better. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now,
There
if
was
you
no transfer portal.
no, listen, there was no portal, and it's like now in the pros, if you like, if a coach says the wrong thing to a guy, guess what? They're getting that coach up out of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, listen, you got to be coachable, because at the end of the day, none of us are perfect, and you figure that coach sitting on the baseline, he has the ability to see something in your game that you might not while you were playing on the court. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, getting back to Ant-Man, because again, I don't agree with what he just said, but I give him his props on the court because I love what I saw from him last season during the playoffs. Because you know what? That dude, every single round, okay, was like, you know what? I want to take your best scorer. Okay.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
and I want to take him at the defensive level. He got Phoenix up out of there. He was a big difference in Minnesota beating Denver. And I know he wanted the Kyrie challenge in the
He
conference.
wanted it. Yeah.
He regretted it, but
But he was
but
he had enough competitive fire to want it. And
yeah,
that says a lot.
yeah. Because listen, they just got a guy up out of Minnesota who, has a lot of talent to be much better than what he is. And I know like there's some Knicks fans that are singing his praises right now, but I'm like, hey, let's just wait until it's a key game in the postseason where you know what, a dude has 9 points and like 5 rebounds and disappears. And we've seen other guys, when the chips are pushed to the middle of the table, a la James Harden,
Mm-hmm.
when it's a win or go home scenario and he doesn't show up. You know what I'm saying? Like, listen, you can't just say that you're great. If you want to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk, and there's layers to it, and there's a responsibility that comes with it. You want to sit up there, you want 40, $50 million a year. there's responsibility.
Yes, that comes along with it.
levels of it. Okay,
Hmm.
you have to be a leader. Okay, you have to be that guy to take that, that take that clutch shot, when the game is on the line. You have to be that guy that faces the media, win, lose, or draw, and say, hey, you know what? This is on me. It's not a part-time position. It's kind of, you know, going back to bodybuilding for a minute. It's kind of like Ronnie Coleman. Everybody
Hmm.
wants to be a bodybuilder, but no, everybody don't want to lift this heavy ass weight, man.
Exactly. And a lot of people want to be Ronnie Coleman then, but they damn sure don't want to be Ronnie Coleman now.
No, you know what I'm saying? And like it's like I said, it's just levels to it. I'm not a fan of this buddy ball and all this other stuff. I give guys credit, okay, for taking their careers into their own hands, but I feel
And
like,
knowing that it's a business and knowing that it's a business first
listen,
and that they are the actual business, they are the commodity because they're the product that's being on display that gets these
absolutely,
owners these lucrative TV deals.
absolutely, because I mean, you figure how many billions of dollars was just thrown out over the summer by Amazon and NBC and
For those rights,
yeah,
to those
right.
television rights.
You know what I'm saying? But I'm like, listen, some of these dudes, I'm like, listen, I think that I get the business aspect, but again, I'm not trying to sound like the old man, get off my lawn, but I'm like, listen, maybe scale back on the podcasting. Leave the podcasting to like guys like us because you're on the podcast and it's just like you're focusing more on the podcast than what you're doing on the court in some cases. And then on top of that, you're up there calling out teammates, calling out opponents, in
And
podcasts.
you're averaging a triple single
Yeah,
like Draymond Green.
yeah, no, no,
It's,
no.
dude, come on, man. It's
Listen,
like, come on, man.
listen, I understand that you want to segue to your next career. I totally get it, but you know what? Those opportunities are always going to be there. You know,
Yep,
you
they
know,
are.
it
And you
it
can do it during the summer.
yeah. Listen. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You got the time. You could be an apprentice. You name it.
So, but that's back to the differences between the old school, quote unquote, NBA and the new school. The old school took being an NBA basketball player, they had more pride in actually giving it their all and making that their singular focus. I think that that's one of the differences. Um, Popovich is responsible for a lot of what's going on in the NBA right now because he's the one who invented the load management way of doing things. With Tim Duncan putting
The,
on the the
the, the,
stat sheet and everything before the game, essentially not going to play, too old. Kawhi Leonard, all of these things. He was the inventor of that,
right, right.
and now it's gotten blown out of proportion. So much so that the overcorrection, putting in the 65 game minimum, uh, unless you're not eligible for postseason awards, that cost Embiid the MVP. He was
Yeah,
supposed to be back to back MVP. You know
but
what I'm saying? It's cost certain players money actually because they were ineligible for all NBA spots.
but
If
but
you really look back to last season, Tyrese Halliburton's numbers, his averages would have actually been better. And all credit to Tyrese Halliburton. That hamstring was never good after
right,
he hurt it.
right.
But he knew he had to reach that 65 game threshold in order to unlock certain incentives, in order to be eligible for certain postseason awards and accolades. So I don't know, man. It's a catch 22.
I mean, it's a catch-22, and like to the point with Tyrese Halliburton, you know how it is because you play ball. Hamstrings are one of those things that are very delicate, and it's not like
Very
it's going to get better in a week or something like that because eventually you're going to need to explode and you don't know how it's going to react. So,
exactly.
it's very sensitive. And it's like I feel for guys like Tyrese Halliburton, but at the end of the day, they gotta blame their contemporaries because, the way that their contemporaries have acted in such situations, has allowed it. And honestly, I'm not letting the owners off the hook either because you look at a guy like Zion, you sat up there, this guy has not played, and you still turned around and gave him a max deal.
The max, the
Right.
max.
Right. So I'm like, if the guy didn't play when he wasn't getting paid, what do you think that's going to happen now when the dude's getting 40 or $50 million a year?
Look at
Okay.
Ben Simmons. Look at Ben Simmons. And I had this conversation with my little brother earlier today, right? It would not surprise me because who do they have on that next team? They have Cam Thomas. They
That
have
beats
Dennis Schroeder now. They
and
still have Cam Johnson,
right.
right? Okay. So you have three people who can score from the perimeter. Cam Johnson and Cam Thomas are very good 3-point shooters, right? So now you have space. It would not surprise me if Ben Simmons averaged 17 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists,
If
or
he if he
eight
plays.
assists, 7 rebounds. It would not surprise me because someone of his athletic ability, when motivated, because this is a contract year for him, it would not surprise me if he averaged 17, 8, and 7. One of these foolish owners give this guy a max contract during the summer, and then he's back to not playing games and averaging 10, 5, and 4. It would
And
not surprise me.
and that's in the 20 games that he would play for the season.
Exactly.
And it's like, listen, you can't, it's like you turn around, you reward those guys, and it's like even with the All-Star game, I personally I've stopped watching the All-Star game because
It's not
I,
competitive.
it's not because it was like, when we grew up, okay, the All-Star game might have been like 130 to like 125 or whatever like that, but guess what? Those guys were competitive, and it was like they were competitive in the standpoint that they played, but then on top of that, they still wanted to put on a show for the fans. I remember one game, I think it was at some point when T Mac was in Orlando. But of course, playing in the East, he's still playing with his cousin Vince because Vince was in Toronto. So of course, one would throw the ball off the backboard to the other. The other one would catch it. Okay, we're gonna do something there. Or like if Shaq was on the perimeter guarding somebody, or if Shaq was running the point or stuff like
Yeah.
that. But yo, listen, these guys still competed. You know what I'm saying? Because it
When
was like,
Shaq threw it on David Robinson in that All-Star,
yeah,
that was ridiculous.
yeah,
Ridiculous.
yeah,
And you could tell both guys were taking a challenge because other people would have got out the way.
yeah.
And I do think David Robinson should have gotten out the way. They had evil intentions behind it.
Well,
That
listen,
All-Star game when Steph and Allen Iverson took over in the fourth quarter
yeah,
to pull that win out for the East, it was them going back and forth with Kobe on the
and
West.
and you think about that All-Star game because that was 2001. There were a lot of bragging rights on the line because the West was heavily favored because the thing was at that point, every team that made the playoffs from the West had a quality big. I think
Yep,
Spurs had Duncan and Robinson, Lakers had Shaq, Kings had Chris Webber, the Trailblazers had Rasheed. Uh,
correct.
you had Dallas with Dirk. You still had Karl Malone with the Jazz.
Yep.
Forgive me if I'm missing anybody, but we could go right down the list.
Mm-hmm.
And you figured, okay, the East had a lot of injuries that year. Okay, we're gonna give you Ray Allen. Okay, we're gonna give you Houston Sprewell. We're gonna give you Steph and AI.
Allen Iverson.
And yeah, and it's like to give you an idea of how things were in the East that year. I know he's no longer with us, but Anthony Mason was an All-Star that year, so that lets you know how it was.
Where the talent was concentrated. It was
Right.
concentrated on the West.
Right. And it was like those dudes came back and they won. Not to mention you had J Kidd, you had Gary Payton, you had Kobe,
Mm-hmm.
all of that West squad. So, you look at it and it was a badge of honor to say, hey, you know what? We went out there and we beat you guys.
Yeah. So even from that standpoint, old school all-star games were more competitive and more exciting to watch than new school all-star games.
Listen, I'll take it a step further. Okay, you and I played pickup ball. I can't count how many times, but I know
Yep,
that we did play. Never had a problem with you before, never had a problem with you afterwards. And but it was one of those things when we stepped on the court, okay, you weren't going to take it easy on me on the wing because you and I are cool. I wasn't going to take it easy on you in the post if we fight for a rebound or whatever like that.
exactly.
We were going to give it everything we had. We dap it up at the end, and we go get a bite to eat and
And
go.
and most likely we was probably talking mess in the weight room.
Oh, you remember what I did to you other day? Exactly. It was one of those type things. But it's like now you don't have, that competitive nature. It's like I think back to when the Timberwolves had both Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns out there, and it was kind of like, you had two guys that, what, give me my 25 million a year. I'll give you 20 points and I'm gonna go home. And of course,
But that goes back to ownership and the front office, like you had said previously. Why did you keep Andrew Wiggins and let Zach LaVine walk? Zach LaVine is the one who wanted it, who
oh,
wanted all of the smoke.
or you figure twice because you traded Jimmy Butler in Minnesota, and then Philly, okay, kept Ben Simmons over Jimmy Butler. And I'll tell you
And
like this,
Tobias.
and
And
Tobias
Tobias Harris.
and Tobias Harris. And you figure Jimmy since then got to the finals twice with a Heat team that had no business being there or
Did
talent wise.
not deserve to be there. Yep.
So imagine what would have happened if he had stayed in Philadelphia, if he had stayed in Minnesota. But he was like, listen,
Correct.
I'm not here to be a third option for these dudes because you look at it, is Jimmy Butler the most talented guy?
No.
No, he's not.
Nope. Is
But
he the
you
most athletic? No, he is
no,
not.
but you figure Jimmy Butler was one of those guys, all of the top colleges overlooked him coming out of high school. I think he might have had to go the community college way first before he got
Before
that.
Marquette?
Right. And it's one of those where like typically, and this goes back to Tom Crean when he was coaching Marquette, and then of course it was Tom Crean and it was Buzz, and I know Wojciechowski was there. He started bringing in more All Americans, and then of course now Shaka Smart. But nonetheless, those Marquette guys, they play with a chip on their shoulder. Why? Because they were like 2 and 3 star, maybe even in some cases no star recruits coming out of high school to college. They were overlooked. You look at Dwayne Wade. Dwayne
Yep.
Wade was not a guy that was heavily recruited out of high school. Okay, even at Marquette, he didn't become a household name until the NCAA tournament his last year when he got a triple double against Kentucky in the Midwest Regional Final. And we see it so often, now in the NBA because it's like it's so watered down. Nobody plays D. A triple double in college is difficult.
Yeah, it's hard to do. Number one, there's only 40 minutes.
Right. Right. Okay. And you figure, you play zone, like guys can play zone. They could do like, and there's different types of zones that guys can play.
Mm-hmm.
There's different ways that they could take you out of a game. Dwayne Wade got that triple double. Dwayne Wade got Marquette to the Final Four. After that, everybody knew who Dwayne Wade was. But Dwayne Wade still played in the NBA like he had a chip on his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Getting back to Jimmy Butler, I know the injuries are starting to catch up to him, and I think it's because of the way that he plays. Because when Jimmy plays, he plays hard at every end of the floor. Okay, and it's one of those where he came into the NBA with that chip on his shoulder. He
Yeah.
plays with the chip on his shoulder. And going back to what you were saying about the old school guys, they came in like that because even if you were a top pick, you still had to prove yourself. I think,
You had to prove why. You had
right,
to prove why you were the right person to
right.
be a top pick, and you wanted to prove it.
Like I think about Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley, I think, was taken fifth overall in 1984 by Philadelphia, but he didn't play right away because Billy Cunningham was like, "Listen, yo, you're out of shape, and you're not playing for me until you get in shape." Nowadays, if you do something like that, they're gonna get that coach up out of it. But you think about it, and it was like, "Yo, listen, going into a team like that with vets, you had Moses Malone, who, when you talk about bigs, great bigs in the NBA, his name does not get mentioned enough. But you had Moses Malone, you had Dr. J, you had Maurice Cheeks. Guess what? Those guys have been there and done that. They could show you the way. And of course, Charles was, smart enough to
to
listen.
listen.
Right nowadays, the youngsters come in, they expect, to come in right away, get a shoe deal, get 20 million a year, X, Y, and Z. And it's like at the end of the day, I understand that it's a business. I totally get it, but you got to pay your dues, brother. You got
Yeah.
got to pay your dues, man.
Yep. Now, as it pertains to us being on the cusp of this new NBA season 24-25,
Hmm.
right? The more things change, the more they stay the same. Kawhi Leonard has not played any preseason games, and he's probably not going to be ready for the start of the season. So I don't know how he nor his camp thought he would be able to play in the Olympics, right? And Paul George just hyperextended his knee, and he's going to be out for a while.
Listen, I just said this a couple of nights ago on another platform with some cats, and I said, listen, it's basically when I saw that Paul George was leaving the Clippers to sign with the Sixers. Number one, I thought he was in his feelings when he did it. Number two, I said, you know what? Just cue the Spider-Man meme because you're going from playing with Kawhi, a guy who can't stay healthy, to going to play with Embiid,
A
another
guy
guy,
who can't stay healthy.
right? And now you yourself can't stay healthy either. And I said this from the moment that Paul George went to Philadelphia. I'm like, listen, he got a pass because he didn't have to deal with the media like that in Indiana. He got a pass because he didn't have to deal with the media like that in OKC. I know that you're playing in LA, but you still got a pass because you played for the Clippers and not the
And
Lakers.
not the Lakers. Yep.
What are you going to do in Philadelphia? Because Philadelphia is hard on athletes, especially when you are viewed as an outsider and an outsider that just came in for big money. You
Yep.
better produce. That's all I'm going to say.
And you better play. They in Philadelphia care about how many games you play. This is a city who witnessed Allen Iverson play through every injury you could imagine. They had to force Allen Iverson to miss games. He was his own worst enemy as it pertained to that. AI wasn't sitting down for nothing. I'm trying to
Listen,
play not only every game, but I'm trying to play every game like it was my last. And now you have Paul George, who is a poster child for any knick-knack injury. I'm going to sit. And I'm also a magnet for major injuries. And you never know when I might not show up in the playoffs.
yeah,
You never know when I may pull a disappearing act.
yeah,
It can come at any time.
yeah,
So I think that Daryl Morey did. It was a good trade for it. It was a good pickup for Daryl Morey. I think he did a hell of a job with the moves that he made this summer to give himself at least a puncher's chance against the Celtics, right? And now against the Knicks.
hmm
He did a great job, and it was a great decision signing Andre Drummond
yes,
for the games that Embiid will have to miss. And he'll have to miss these games for the rest of his career.
yeah,
I see that. He did a great job re signing Kelly Oubre for the games that Paul George will miss. And they also stole the kid from Miami who messed up. Him and his agent overplayed his cards in Miami, Martin,
yeah. Caleb Martin,
Caleb Martin,
yeah,
to help fill that void for when Paul George misses time. So Daryl Morey did a great job, but those two guys, I I don't know what they're going to do health wise with Embiid and Paul George because you damn near have to keep them wrapped in bubble wrap.
yeah. It's like, listen, it's one of those. It's like if you can get 60 games out of Embiid, God bless you. All right, and if you can get 65 games out of Paul George as well, it's going to be a miracle. And it's not just that because once these guys get to the playoffs, they're not going to get, they're not going to stay healthy either. Like even I've listened to guys like a la, the Kenyon Martins and the Bonzi Wells of the world from that era. They talked about it where they was like, listen, you don't get better by not playing. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
You have to go out there and play. And I know Byron Scott told the story from when he coached the Nets, and Kenyon Martin didn't want to practice because he said he was tired. And he was like, all right. So he went to the trainer and he was like, listen, I want you to work him to the point that guess what? He's going to want to practice from now on. And guess what? Kmart came back and played. But Kenyon Martin was a guy that when he stepped on that court, you knew you was getting everything that he had. You
Yeah,
know
he
what
gave
I'm
it
saying?
his all.
Right. You know what I'm saying? And it
And
was
he was actually undersized at that time,
right.
playing the power forward position.
Because
Because at Cincinnati, he looked like a bigger 6'9" than he was.
he was
And the way
lean.
he jumped out the gym.
He was lean. He was probably like about 240. But
Exactly.
then you coming into the league taking on guys of like 275, 285. It's a big
Tim Duncan, 6'10", 6'11". Rasheed Wallace, 6'10", 6'11". Chris Webber. Those are the guys
right.
that Kmart had
Had
to
it
guard.
on a
And then
nightly
he had
basis.
to switch off onto shooting guards
Yeah.
and chase around the Ray Allens, the Kobe Bryants, people like that. And he talks about that sometimes on Gil's Arena. He's like, yo, these guys have no idea that George Karl and all of them used to say, all right, Kenyon, you got Kobe. And I had to take that challenge. So that
Listen,
he was a good player.
not
He maxed out his abilities. He left it all on the court.
listen, he did. I think, playing with J Kidd definitely helped him because J Kidd, and that's something that, this game, the current game is missing is like those floor generals because the guys that they're not just a point guard because, oh, they're 6'2". No, because they're a point guard because they're going to make the people around them better. Drew Holiday
Mm-hmm.
is one of those guys.
Yep.
Chris Paul, even in this advanced stage of his career, he's one of those guys.
So
And
was that Drew Holiday trade, right? Which was essentially, even though there was multiple stops, right, and reroutes, that Damian Lillard for Drew Holiday trade essentially did the Bucks give Boston a championship, not only a championship, but a championship window for the next 2 to 3 years. Because it was already crazy when they got Porzingis.
hmm
People were betting on, well, at least they lost Marcus Smart. So they lost their defensive bite on
hmm
the perimeter. But now you get Drew Holiday, who not only, to me, is the superior defensive player between himself and Marcus Smart, even though Marcus Smart has the Defensive Player of the Year award.
he's quicker than
He's
Marcus Smart.
also a way better offensive player, and
Mhm.
he is an actual point guard.
Right. Listen,
Did Milwaukee will they regret that move?
I think they will because I feel like, the Bucks, they pushed the panic button because you think about it, all right, they won in 2021. In 2022, they got to the second round. They took the Celtics to 7 games and lost. But let's not forget, Middleton got hurt. He hurt his knee in the first round that year. Then 2023, they had the best record in the East, and then Giannis had that back injury, and then Jimmy Butler just basically punked those boys. Okay, and I think after that, ownership pushed the panic button. They fired Coach Bud, which Giannis
Yep,
was not thrilled about, and then you traded Drew Holiday, and of course they weren't winning before Drew Holiday got there, and of
got
course
there.
they weren't going to trade him to the Celtics because you're not going to trade him in the East. But the Celtics were like, wait a minute, okay, he's going to Portland, he's going to be a stopgap guy there wherever they traded him to. We're going to make sure that we go out there and get him. And you figure that was a steal because if you're Boston, you get another ball handler.
Yep, and one that can actually put you into your offensive sets so that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown don't have to do it. Marcus Smart is not good at running
No,
an
no,
offense.
no. Marcus Smart is kind of like one of those classic tweener guards. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Marcus Smart, as good as he is, I think he's like a great six man. Okay.
Yeah,
Drew,
yes.
Drew Holiday is a starter. And you look at every single place that Drew Holiday's been in the NBA, he's had an impact. New Orleans, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and of course now Boston. And then on top of that, him coming back to the East last year and being on Boston, I think it motivated him more because it's like the last thing that you want to give an athlete is additional motivation. He's kind of like, okay, y'all got rid of me for him. I'm gonna show y'all something.
Exactly.
And I know that okay, now Milwaukee has had an off season to get ready with Doc, but it ain't there anymore. To me, cause like I don't believe in Doc Rivers in the postseason. That's number one. Number two, I don't see it from Dame Lillard because he's an offensive upgrade to Drew Holiday, but Drew Holiday, it's all about his defense. You look at when late in those games on the perimeter when the Celtics beat the Pacers when they needed that key play. Who was making that key play last year in the
Yeah,
playoffs?
it was Drew.
It
It
was
was Drew.
It was Drew
Yeah.
Holiday. You have a guy who has championship leadership. So I think that's why I really do think that the Celtics are going to once again be in that mix, uh, to get to win a championship because it's one of those where you really don't need Kristaps Porzingis for the regular season if you're Boston. You
You
have
don't.
you have enough talent around you. So you just keep Porzingis ready for that postseason run. And you look at the games that he did play in the finals against Dallas last year. They never had an answer for him.
They did not. They
I,
did not.
I guarantee you, if the Celtics had to play the Mavericks right now, the best of seven series, they still wouldn't have an answer for him. You know
It's
what I'm saying?
true.
Because a skilled big like him who can run the floor when healthy, pass, rebound, shoot from the inside or out, okay, that right there, this side of Nikola Jokic, you don't see that often from a guy at that position.
Now, that is also why I think that the Knicks move, even for all of Cat's lack of fire that we would want him to have,
Hmm.
he's a huge upgrade over Mitchell Robinson, who not only is just a rim runner, he has no offensive game whatsoever, right?
Hmm.
He's always hurt.
Yeah.
So he's never available when you need him to be available.
Hmm.
Julius Randle would not have fit into the way the Knicks are playing now. Well, now while they are Jalen Brunson
Right.
centric, right? Now you have a guy who's essentially, besides Bam, and I would say he's way better than Bam offensively. I think that the Knicks have the second best center in the East. I
Listen,
think that it's Embiid, and then it's Cat, and then it's Bam,
mhm.
and then it's Porzingis, and then probably Miles Turner.
Listen, I can't disagree with you there, even if I wanted to, because I don't think anybody has ever really gone out there and questioned the talent of Karl Anthony Towns. It's the want.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, that's always been the biggest thing. And it's like if you look at Cat, yo, look at his numbers. His numbers go down in the postseason. Okay. And that's when your numbers need to go up. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those where from Minnesota's standpoint, and this is what happens when everybody's not on the same page because you have two ownership groups with the Minnesota Timberwolves. You have Alex
Yes,
Rodriguez and Mark Laurie, and then you have Glenn Taylor. Glenn Taylor last season was supposed to succeed or seed rather majority ownership to A-Rod and Mark Laurie. He didn't.
but then
A-Rod,
he saw what he had in Anthony Edwards and how Anthony Edwards is pushing this team is
right,
more valuable now.
right. But then A-Rod and Mark Laurie are looking at it like, hey, we're a small market team. And like we talked about this last season, that additional luxury tax apron is a game
Yep.
changer. Okay.
Yes.
So they're looking at it and saying, hey, if we can get to offer some of this money, we can get under that luxury tax and we can get some of that revenue sharing money in as opposed to paying the luxury tax. Now, if you're Minnesota, you're clearly not going to shop Ant-Man. You are not going to do that.
No.
So contract wise, it comes down to Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. And as much as they would love to move Rudy Gobert, there's nobody in the NBA that's taking that contract.
They're
So
not.
so it's like Cat becomes the odd man out. For me with the Knicks, because on paper, I think it looks good. I just worry about it from a chemistry standpoint because I know you're hearing the stories about DiVincenzo and his perceived role going forward with the Knicks. But my thing is this, is like you've heard Jalen Brunson talk about it, like, hey, you know, Dante DiVincenzo was one of his groomsmen at his wedding. You know what I'm saying? So clearly they're boys. And then, Jalen Brunson took less money, for a lot of things to work with the Knicks. And now you ship out one of his college teammates. I'm just curious to see from a chemistry standpoint how it's going to work because I do agree with you. Eventually, Julius Randle was going to be the odd man out.
Exactly. And this is an upgrade on so many different fronts because simply due to lack of availability. When the Knicks
Yeah.
went on that great postseason run, they didn't have Mitchell Robinson nor Julius Randle.
And
So you didn't have two bigs. You had Isaiah Hartenstein
who's
instead,
who's now in OKC.
who's now in OKC, right? Cat is better than all three of them. He's better than Hartenstein, he's better than Randall, and he's better than Mitchell Robinson.
Absolutely.
So he's just added to what the Knicks had going during that postseason. So, all right, Dante DiVincenzo is a big loss, but Dante DiVincenzo is not better than Mikal Bridges. So you slide in Mikal Bridges at the two.
Hmm.
You're bringing
You got
the undersized small forward
you got
who
they still got Anunoby,
they still got Ananobi, Josh Hart.
Josh Hart.
So you got Brunson at the one, Bridges at the two, Josh Hart at the three,
Mm-hmm.
Ananobi at the four, Cat at the five.
Yeah.
You
And
got McBride coming off the bench.
and
You got
do they still have Precious Achua?
they still got Precious Achua. They
Mm-hmm.
still have him. They said Mitchell Robinson to be back by the new year.
And he'll
They
be hurt
have Shaman.
and he'll be hurt by the trade deadline.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. He'll be hurt before the Knicks have a chance to trade him up out of there. He'll be hurt.
Mhm.
He'll be hurt. So I think that they made I think they made the moves they had to make to keep pace with Philly.
You know,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
no, you go.
I was just gonna say, you know which team benefited most from that trade? Denver.
From that trade
Come
out
on.
of the Knicks in Minnesota.
I say Denver. Because if you think about it, it's like now you no longer have to worry about Cat in the West. You know, if you
Just
are
Gobert, and Gobert is no worry at all. Yeah,
and
Jokic doesn't have to go up against a two-headed.
right, and
Yeah,
Jokic puts Gobert in a blender every single
yeah,
time that he
that's
sees him.
true.
So it's like I look at it like this. I know that Denver did lose KCP in free agency. He's in Orlando.
I think that that's a little overrated. That them talking about that loss, they acting like KCP averaged
20.
16 and completely shut down superstar shooting guards or point guards, which he did not. He had
But
championship DNA.
right,
He doesn't hurt you.
right,
He doesn't do anything outside of the scope of what his skill set is.
right.
Orlando overpaid for KCP. What's he going to do over there?
I
I think
think
Russ is going to help them out tremendously as it pertains to the losses of Bruce Brown and Jeff Green the
mhm.
summer before.
If you're Denver, do you have Russ start or you have him come off the bench?
If I'm Denver, I would have Russ starting, right? And I would have Christian Brown or Braun, however they pronounce his name, coming off the bench. And I think that that is ultimately a move that they're going to have to make.
Hmm.
If I'm Russ, I'm coming off the bench all season. Keep him in that starting lineup because I have the bench unit now literally all to myself.
Right.
None of these young guys are better than me, right? None of these young guys have more experience than me. I now have a legitimate chance to win six man of the year and a championship. So, from an individual standpoint, if I'm Russ, I'm fighting tooth and nail to no, let me be the six man. because I'm about to achieve more greatness. And if I'm Russ, I'm in Murray's ear all season. And I'm telling him, yo, dude, you're one of the best point guards in this league. You are a closer. Do not worry about what transpired against Minnesota and in the summer in the Olympics. We're
Hmm.
back to pick and roll centric basketball with
Yeah.
you and Yoke. And now when Yoke sits out, you guys still have a generator of offense, of offensive opportunities in me. So there is no longer that drop off. All you have to worry about doing is putting the ball in the basket. And
Yeah.
you can do it at a high clip. And if I'm Russ, that's what I'm telling him. And that's what I'm telling Michael Porter Jr. I'm saying when you catch it, let it fly. That's what I'm telling them. The This is a great opportunity for Russell Westbrook. And that's my favorite player. So
Hmm.
when I heard Jokic wanted Russ, it's like, yeah, go do that.
Listen, I think Russ has a great opportunity to make an impact right there. That's why, like again, I said as soon as I heard that trade going down and I saw what Minnesota was getting back, I'm like, well, if you're Denver, you're like, thank you.
Yep, you're right about, and I didn't think about that. I did not think about that.
That was the first thing that came to my mind because I'm like, you know what?
Wow.
Yeah,
You're right.
you got cat up out of it. I'm like, yeah, it's one less thing for Russ. I mean, for Nikola
For
Jokic,
Yoke to have to deal with.
right? Because ah,
Oh,
Rudy.
but on the other hand, that also benefits Anthony Davis too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Listen,
Yep.
it does. But see, the thing is like the Lakers. The Lakers are not, a championship team. You know what I'm saying?
No, they're not.
And it's like, honestly, I talked to some people about this the other day. I said, the way that the West is, I think the Lakers and Warriors are going to have to fight, scrap, and claw just to get to the play-in. And it might, listen, if we see both of them sitting at home for the play-in, do not be surprised because you figure you've got
Houston.
Houston's better, Memphis, and I'm not going in the exact order. Houston, Memphis, New Orleans, Dallas, of course, Denver, OKC. We still got Minnesota, still going to be a playoff team.
Sacramento.
Sacramento, okay. You still got Phoenix. The Clippers, I still think the Clippers have the potential to be a playoff team, maybe a play-in team. You
They'll
know,
they'll definitely make the play in
yeah,
because now with they the Clippers are back to playing James Harden Houston Rockets basketball. They're
exactly.
back to that. And he knows how he's great in the regular season. He
Oh yeah,
knows how to
oh yeah.
get you to your destination in the regular season, and he
Hmm.
can still do it. And
Hmm.
with Kawhi being gimpy, that's music to James Harden's ears. He's like, oh, I'm about to be an all-star again.
Oh, he's off to the races. I mean, we might see him, drop 27 or 28 a game. I mean, who else is he gonna have?
28 and 11.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm saying. It's like I'm looking at both the Lakers and Warriors. I don't see it there. And I told some people about this the other day. The Warriors, it's kind of like, when everybody else can see it, but you can't. The Warriors are still trying to win the way that they did 10 years ago.
Yeah,
A lot of those guys have retired. They're older if they're still playing. Some of them aren't even there anymore. And then on top of that, the league is caught up to them and the game has changed as well because we're going back
yeah.
to a more big man game offensively. So you're looking at it right now. I think, Steph is still going to put up his numbers. But listen, again, I would not be surprised if come, April, Golden State is watching the play-in tournament from home. And I really do believe, I think Steve Kerr it's like a package deal right there. Steve Kerr is going to hang around as long as Steph is there. And as soon as Steph hangs it up, Steve Kerr is going to exit stage right now.
Hey, Pete Myers saw the writing on the wall. He got up out of there.
Listen, he packed his bags with the quickness, man. Listen, if this was the Titanic, he was on the first lifeboat, he was out. Okay. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those, listen, after after that 2019 loss to Toronto, I know they came back, they won a couple of years later, but listen, the ship didn't sail, man. The ship
Yeah,
didn't.
it really has. And let me ask you this.
Hmm.
Where is Andrew Wiggins? Why wasn't Andrew Wiggins playing for Team Canada? That's number one in the
Hmm.
Olympics. And where is Andrew Wiggins this preseason? Where is he?
I know. I think over the summer or like maybe like a month or so ago, I think his dad died. I know
Uh,
it was a family member, a close family member that passed away, and I know
okay.
there's rumors about some other personal stuff going on, but I'm like, since they're only rumors and I don't know for a fact, I'm not gonna put anything out.
Yeah, put it out there.
But there's like some other stuff personally that's going on, and because like I mean, you look at Wiggins. His productivity has dropped off since they won that last championship because he was supposed to be the next guy
He's supposed to be the second guy.
that they segue to. And when there's stuff going on off the court, and your mind is not there, you're not gonna reach that level because again, I tell people, I remember watching Andrew Wiggins play that one year at Kansas. Scoring wise, I'm like, you know what? That dude had it, and you could see it when he first came into the league with Minnesota. But in going to Golden State, he was a key factor in them winning that championship. His defense got a lot better,
Yeah,
while once he got to the Warriors. But again, he's got a lot of like off the court stuff going on. So again, I don't. It's rumors as far as what it is. So like I said, I'm not gonna put it out there. But how
got
that
you.
is. You know that
Because he's definitely been missing in action. He's
hmm
definitely been missing.
hmm
It's like it's glaring.
Yeah.
It is glaring. But yeah, the Warriors are cooked. They're cooked.
Not only are they cooked, but them giving Draymond that thank you contract has already hurt them because Clay saw that, and Clay, even though Clay got his money for those couple of years when he wasn't playing, but Clay saw that and he wanted another thank you deal, and of course, since they didn't give him that thank you deal, he left. But I mean, Draymond,
And it's also a slap in the face when you're shooting 39% from three. Okay, I'm not shooting 42% from three. I get it. You're shooting 39% from three. Okay,
mhm,
I'm not averaging 21 points per game, but I am averaging 17.8. You never have any problems on the court as far as your behavior,
he
and
played
definitely have no problems off the court
and
as
he played
far as
D
your behavior.
and he played D as well.
And then, so they say your D has slipped a teeny bit, but Steph Curry can't play D. And Draymond Green is a menace behavior wise. And you give Draymond all of that money.
Listen, it's one of those where Dallas,
Slap in the face for him.
if you're Dallas, you can't make that deal quick enough because you go back and watch the finals again from last spring. What was one thing that hurt Dallas? Outside
No
shooting.
space because of
Right.
the shooting. Yeah.
Right.
No space because of the lack of shooting.
So clearly that changes. And then on top of that, especially for this year, you're going to have a motivated, extra motivated Klay Thompson
Play time.
because he's going to want to prove people wrong. I guarantee you, Klay, without seeing him so far, I guarantee you he probably had to have gotten in probably the best shape that he's been probably in like
Yeah.
6 or 7 years because you know what? He's like, okay, you guys are giving up on me. I'm gonna show you.
I'm going to show you.
You
And
know,
some of the stupidest rhetoric that I've heard from these talking heads on ESPN, Fox, right, is them saying, okay, we all know Clay is not the defender he used to be, but saying, oh, how in late game situations against high powered backcourts, how are the Mavericks going to play Clay, Kyrie, and Luca? Clay's going to have to sit down. If my memory does not serve me correctly, right? If my memory does serve me correctly, Klay Thompson, even as a lesser defender than what he used to be, is still the best defender of the three with him, Kyrie, and Luca.
hmm
Why in the world would Klay Thompson have to sit down?
listen,
That doesn't even make any sense.
I think if you are Luca and Kyrie, I think you defer to Clay for a lot of reasons because not only is he bringing his game with him to Dallas, he's also bringing the Warriors culture. And again,
Yes,
this goes back to what how we started talking about this with the divide with the new school and the old
in
school.
the old school.
And you see how like some of these young dudes didn't want to respect Clay. And I forgot who they played in the playoffs a couple of years ago. I think it might have been It was either Phoenix or Memphis. And I think it was Memphis. And Clay, put up the four fingers like the four horsemen, but it was one of those, listen, you got four championships. You don't win four championships in the NBA by accident. Okay.
Exactly.
And it's like for all that we want to talk about with the Splash Brothers, Steph Curry with the Harlem Globetrotter and one shots. Listen, those dudes play D. Okay.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and the thing is like when you're willing to play D, you are willing to work. So Kyrie has his ring, okay, with Cleveland and LeBron in 2016. Luka's right there, and Luka darn sure wants to get his. Now you bring in a guy like Clay. Of course, you still got your head coach and Jay Kidd who knows what it takes to win a championship in the NBA. But I guarantee you, Clay's going to be a guy that he's going to get the respect of that locker room
Immediately.
because if those guys want to get to that level, they're going to listen to him because
Yeah.
if you're motivated, you got to look at it and say like this, we were 2 wins or 3 wins, whatever it was away from winning an NBA championship. We know we can get there, but can we take that next step? This guy walks into the room, you know, with a handful of rings. Listen, that's what if that's what you want. If you want those bragging rights, you're gonna listen to that guy.
Yeah. And he gives them the best chance as currently constituted and constructed
Hmm.
to get it. And you can't leave him to go and show on Kyrie or go and show on Luca. You can't leave him.
And to your point, all it's gonna take is Clay to knock down one or two shots to open up things for Kyrie and
That's
Luca.
all it takes.
Because if you're gonna have to D him and Kyrie is still super explosive off the dribble, so guess what? That extra second that you have to pay attention to Clay, Kyrie's by you and Kyrie's to the basket, and either he's scoring or he's creating for somebody else. We know what
Correct.
we know what Luka is going to do. So I guarantee you, especially in those playoff situations, in the last 4 or 5 minutes on the basketball game, you're going to see Klay Thompson on the court. You're going.
Correct.
You're
I don't
going.
know. That's why I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what those talking heads are thinking when they say some of the things that they've been saying.
Well, the talking heads are the talking heads because some of those same talking heads are the same ones who want to sit up there and add fuel to the fire when it comes to the likes of disrespecting the likes of, Michael Jordan and so many others who have paved the way. I mean, you think about it, Jerry West, who arguably is the logo of the NBA, a lot of these kids don't know anything about him. They don't even know that he was the architect for two Laker dynasties as a general manager, and
Mm-hmm.
not to mention what he did on the basketball court, in the 1960s and 1970s in the NBA. And of course, the NBA will never admit that Jerry West is a logo. Why? Because you know how much money that they would owe. I know he's
His
passed away.
family.
Yeah, because I mean, you think about how much merchandise that us alone that we've bought that had
Yeah.
that NBA logo on it, the courts, headbands.
Very true.
So,
Very true.
but yeah, and it's like again, you gotta respect, who paved the way for you, man. At the end of the day.
Definitely.
Mhm.
Definitely. So this to wrap it all up, this old school versus new school is quite funny because Anthony Edwards says that his favorite player was Kevin Durant, right? Kevin Durant is very similar to Larry Bird in a lot of different ways,
Mhm.
right? Kevin Durant has not surpassed Larry Bird
No,
on the all-time greats list. And
no.
he may never do it, especially if he doesn't win a championship with the Suns. He needs a championship as I want to say the head guy. I want to say, even though on that Golden State Warriors team, he was the best player.
Mhm.
Um, he needs to win a ring in a place that has not won the ring already before him, which is Phoenix, right? He needs to get the job done there to get past Larry Bird.
Mhm.
Bird is greater than Durant. So that's another arguing point for the old school versus the new school, in my opinion. When they spoke about the level of competition that Jordan went through to get his rings compared to the level of comp a Curry or a LeBron had to go through to get their rings. I want you to name the top 10 greatest players of all time very quickly.
For me, not in any exact order.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I definitely put Mike on that list, of course. Um, I will put Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Okay. For me, I'll put Magic Johnson.
That's three.
Okay. Um, I will definitely put Bill Russell. I never saw him play directly, but I did. I have watched a lot of old basketball, and it's one of those where, from an outsider, they'll say, "Well, Bill Russell didn't, score a lot. He didn't have to, okay, because of the people, A, the people he had around him, and B, the things that he did well, like averaging more than 20 rebounds a game, darn near for his entire career, impacted the game and his defense as well.
So
Um,
that's four.
that's four. You definitely have to put Wilt Chamberlain on that list. Did,
Five.
did I say Kobe Bryant?
Not yet.
Okay, so Kobe Bryant is on that list at number six. Uh,
Six.
did I say LeBron?
Nope.
Okay, so LeBron is seven.
Seven.
So he's on that list as well. Um, I said Shaquille O'Neal.
Mm-hmm.
For me, also, I have to say Larry Bird. You know what I'm saying? Because
Eight.
Larry was a bad man. Um, for me, right there. On top of that, I'm gonna go with surprise here for some people. I'm gonna say Tim Duncan.
Nine.
Okay. And for number 10, wow, you really got me thinking right here. You know what? I'm gonna say Dr. J, man.
So that's 11, right? So you didn't say Curry. You didn't put Curry in the top 10.
No.
So the only players that Curry had to go through for his rings in
Mm-hmm.
your top 10 was LeBron. Jordan had to go through Bird,
Mm-hmm.
Magic, Shaq. Who else did you say? Uh, Tim Duncan was the era that was the next
Tim, Tim, Tim
era.
Tim Duncan was right after that, but he did go through Shaq in 96. Okay. Nobody else on there that because basically by the time he got to that championship level, Bird's back had failed him. You know what
But
I'm
he was still there and he had to go through the Celtics
saying?
to build up to
Hmm.
being the champion that he was.
And then of course, Magic passing the torch to him and
Was Kareem still on the Lakers at any point in time when Mike won a ring? Or he
no,
was long gone?
Kareem's last year was when Isaiah got his first ring, so that was 89.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay.
So that
So Mike had to go through at least three of the greats on your all-time greats list.
hmm
Curry didn't even make your top 10. The only one he had to go through was LeBron. LeBron only had to go, Shaq was on his last leg.
hmm
When Kobe was doing it, LeBron couldn't get to the finals because he couldn't get past Boston.
right.
Um, LeBron didn't have to go through anybody on your top tens list. My top tens list is Mike, LeBron, Kareem, Magic, um, Bill Russell, Bird, Hakeem Olajuwon, Shaq, Kobe, Tim Duncan.
Okay.
Right?
hmm
LeBron ain't have to go through none of them.
hmm
Those are the top 10 like of all time.
Right. And you
So
and well,
how could the competition that Jordan had to go through to get his rings be any lesser than the competition that LeBron or Curry had to go through? Mike had to
well,
go through Barkley, Ewing. Malone, Dominique, Magic, Bird, Isaiah Thomas, Mitch Richmond, Latrell Sprewell, Reggie Miller. There was
Gary.
competition everywhere.
Well, I mean, I will say this about him, about LeBron, because he basically the only finals L that Tim Duncan had, they lost to the Heat. I think that was 2013, 2013. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
Duncan was already starting to slide because
Yep.
at that point it was more of Tony Parker and Manu, and then
Yes.
of course the year later it was Kawhi. You know.
Yep.
But the thing is like, yo, again, you gotta go, like, this is why I always tell people, regardless of the sport, you can't compare eras because it's totally different. The 90s basketball was different than the 2000s. The 2000s was different than the 2010s. The 90s was different than the 1980s. You know what I'm saying? It was a different brand of ball. And it's just like, I get tired of people when they say, "Oh, the league changed the rules, to accommodate Michael Jordan." Listen, they took out hand checking, yeah. And I know people want to complain about the physicality. The reason why they complain, why like the physicality got eliminated is because the Detroit Pistons took it over the edge. And the example that I always tell people, if you're driving your car in a 55 mile an hour zone and you go 57, unless you deal with a police officer that is a stickler for the rules, most of them are going to leave you alone. Now, in that same 55 zone, if you're doing 80, they're going to pull you over and they're going to read you the riot act for speeding. That was basically it with the Detroit Pistons of the 80s. Physical basketball had always been there. You knew that if you drove to the lane, there was a price to pay. You weren't it,
Mm-hmm.
there was no such thing as easy layups. The Pistons mindset was, you know what? Well, if you're going to go to the lane, all five of us are going to foul you because they can only call one foul at a time. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't just that they wanted to foul you, they wanted to make you remember about it the next time you came to the lane, might give you a little love tap or two on the way. And I think the biggest issue was the fights that came with it. And I know
Mm-hmm.
David Stern, the former NBA commissioner, he understood the entertainment value of it.
Yes.
And, just not to get too far off a subject here, the thing with the Detroit Pistons, they kind of did it to themselves from the standpoint of the non-handshake in 91. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that rubbed a lot of people
The
the wrong
wrong way.
way. And unfortunately for Isaiah Thomas, I feel like it's left a mark on his illustrious career because Isaiah was a bad dude, one of the
Yep.
best point guards ever. But of course, since he was the best player on the team, he basically became the front man for that whole situation. But nonetheless, you did get some physicality out of the game. It was still very physical. And then, of course, even more physicality left the game after the Malice in the Palace because once that happened, whereas guys might have been suspended for one game before for fighting, now they were getting 20 or 25 games
Yeah.
each.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
Because I think back after the Malice at the Palace happened and that whole fight with the Nuggets and the Knicks at the Garden, and that basically cost Carmelo a chance to be MVP that year because
Mm-hmm.
he had started off so strong, and I think David Stern suspended him for like 15, 20 games.
Correct.
After that fight. So there's levels to it, as far as games changing and like games evolving, whatever way you want to slice it.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, it's one of those where it's so difficult to compare eras. I think about, Mike's era in the 1990s, and people always want, like, some people want to question, okay, who he went up against. I'm like, listen, he went up against the best teams of that era because you figure, all right, he faced Drexler in 92. Drexler had just gotten to the NBA Finals in 90 when he lost to the Pistons, and of course, got to the conference finals again in 91. And Magic was like, nah, 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 we not having that. You think about the Suns team in 93, what Charles Barkley brought to that team. You had a Kevin Johnson who people don't remember for what he did, and of course Mike had to go through the Knicks. talent wise, did the Knicks match up to the Bulls? Not really, but they kind of like resembled the Detroit
The
Pistons
Pistons
because of the physicality. And I
with a
think
more talented center.
right. And I think the other thing that like younger cats or anybody might look back on it and now and question that era is because listen, you're looking at it from the standpoint now where you have 3 and 4 all-star caliber players on each team, so
On
to
each
speak,
contending team. Yep.
right on the top tier teams. You didn't have that back then. It was kind of like with the Knicks, you knew that their focal point was Patrick Ewing. Before the Spurs got Tim Duncan, the focal point was David
David
Robinson.
Robinson.
You might have a scenario where, okay, Utah had Karl Malone and John Stockton, and Seattle had Sean Kemp and Gary Payton, but that was about it.
Yeah.
Like the narrative has now changed. So like now we gotta have an all-star caliber point guard. We gotta have an all-star big. We gotta have, an all-star wing player. And I know that people are gonna say, well, what about the Lakers of the 80s? They drafted most of those guys. What about the Celtics of the 80s? They drafted most of those guys.
Hmm.
It wasn't like, okay, let me just try to go out there and link up with this guy. Let's have a powwow at the All-Star game. Yo, okay, you go throw a fit so we can get you traded to my team over the summer. No, no, no. It was none of that. Okay, it
I
was none
agree.
of it was none of that. It was like, listen, I wanted to beat you. If you and I played on different teams, okay, and you beat me, I'm not going over there looking at you saying, "Oh man, Ern, listen, man, yo, get me on team for the next time we run,
It's
man."
like, nah, I'm staying with this team. And when we get up after next, I hope you win this next game too. I
Right.
hope you win this because I'm trying to get back on and
We
be the one to
we
pick you off.
we coming back. You know what I'm saying? But it's a mentality, man. And it's just like the bulk of these guys simply don't have it, man. They
Because
just
that's not the atmosphere in AAU and stuff like that that they grew up in,
no,
and it plays a part.
it's like even now, it's just like you see guys with this whole transfer portal thing. Some of these guys will be 4-year college players and they played at 4 different schools.
You know what though? It's now again, this is what happens when overcorrections take place. The NCAA was so corrupt and so stringent on college athletes. I mean, when we were playing for the schools, that was a full-time job. And unless you're going to a higher level D1 like a Duke, a North Carolina, a Maryland, Florida, Florida State, places like that, you're
Hmm.
not getting money from boosters under
No,
the table. You're
no.
not getting all of these benefits, right? You can't even work a part-time job because your schedule is full with athletics and with schoolwork. And
Yeah,
then too, if you don't get along with the coach, or if you and the coach are not seeing things eye to eye, or
you're
come to
screwed.
find out the dream that those coaches were selling you as a junior and senior in high school to get you to their schools does not work out your freshman year, your sophomore year, and now you're stuck at that school because if you transfer, you got to sit out a year.
Mhm.
That crushed a lot of players, a lot of college athletes. So now this is the overcorrection. And I'm glad that the power is more in the hands of the parents and the college athletes and
Mhm.
not this corrupt NCAA or these institutions that were making all of that money off of the name and likeness of the players. I remember sitting in the dorms playing one of those NCAA games. I have no money in my pockets, right?
But
I'm playing as me
yeah,
in
yeah,
the NCAA game.
yeah.
Come
Listen,
on.
listen. I have a good friend of mine who played ball, and I felt bad for him. And it's like there's so many others like him. The coach that recruited him to that school was an assistant coach, and within his first year there, that assistant coach left.
That's the worst. That's
And
the worst. Most of the time, it's the assistants who recruit you,
right,
and that's who you built the relationship
right.
with.
And see, my thing is like my biggest thing is I feel like if the coach leaves, I think you should get a free and clear opportunity because if the coach that was there gets another job at another institution, he doesn't have to sit out. He's starting to coach right away.
right away.
But even if you wanted to go join him at said institution,
You got to sit out of here.
right? I feel like, you know what? I feel like everybody should get like a one-time get out of jail free card. You know what? They sold you a dream on a recruiting trip. It ain't working out. You get to bounce. But like my only problem is the guys who every single year it's a different institution. It's like
Yep.
if you're a 4 year college player and you've played at four different schools, you never were around long enough to learn a system. You know what I'm saying? And that right there is a big thing. And it's just like sometimes if you're not good enough to reach your own potential expectations, maybe sometimes you got to look in the mirror and say, hey, what can I do to get better? And so many kids, they get lost up in the wash because they got the wrong people telling them the wrong things as far as
Yes.
like the money that they can make. Because I mean, you just look at it from an American basketball aspect, and I know like we jumped the shark here a little bit before we wrap
Mhm.
up, but it's one of those where like you have close to 500 D1 basketball schools. Let's say of those 500 D1 basketball schools, you have 40 kids who declare early for the NBA draft. Right off the bat, with 30 teams, there's only 60 guys getting drafted. We're not even mentioning the guys who are coming in from overseas. So
Mhm.
if you have 40 kids that declared early, there's only what 14 lottery picks, and once you get to the second round, unless your name is Bronny, that money's not guaranteed. You know,
What did they give him? They gave him 4 years, 7 million.
yeah, something like that. Yeah, so it's one of those things though, where it comes back to getting to having the wrong people in your ear and getting the wrong advice, and it has ruined, a lot of kids' futures. You
Yeah.
know,
Yes.
it truly has, and I feel like, you know, do your research, because everybody's going to tell you whatever you want to hear to get you to go play for their respective school. You got to go out there and make the best possible decision for
For
you.
yourself
And
and
I
for your
think,
family.
I,
And the parents have to immerse themselves
yeah,
in the business of how this whole basketball thing works because you are your child's first agent and manager. You're the
absolutely.
child's first handler.
Yeah,
So they have to educate themselves. But that also does still stay on topic with the differences between old school basketball versus new school basketball and how things work, how things are structured, and the business of it all because
yeah.
it's all inclusive. It's not just the play on the court, it's what happens outside the court too.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not mad, at some of these kids getting the opportunity to make money because I'm like, listen, I know guys personally that deserve to get, money. And unfortunately, they didn't get that opportunity. You see some of these teams, some of these schools where they have, the basketball team makes the NCAA tournament, or like their football team goes to a big bowl game, and guess what? When they come back, now you see the construction cranes going up around the school, building new buildings and swimming pools and all this other stuff.
Correct?
And it's like, these kids, they gotta go out there and try to get phone cards like like this before the days of cell phones,
Yeah.
giving you
Yes.
an idea how old we are and things of that nature. So it's like, listen, I'm all for the kids getting the bread. I
Yep.
listen, I totally am. It's just like, listen, just make the right decisions and just have the right people around you and just be willing to listen. That's the biggest thing for me, man.
Correct.
Mhm.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, man. But listen, man, we have covered a lot. I mean,
Yep.
a ton. And I think we covered more than what we initially anticipated going in. But I think this right here was tremendous, man. This,
Me too. Well, I had a great time as always.
yeah, man. And I mean, wow. So, I mean, listen, we're gonna be doing this some more, especially, with the NBA season, literally right around the corner. I think it's gonna be exciting. I think it's gonna pick up right after Christmas.
Definitely.
I think there's levels to it. You got Christmas, Then once the All-Star game happens, and then like that stretch run for the postseason, and then of course I forgot to mention the trade deadline because
Yep.
once those trades happen and you know who's like locked in to said teams, for the entire season. And the other big thing for me is going to be the injuries because whenever key guys get hurt, that opens up opportunities for other guys to go out there and shine. You figure, the whole Tyrese Maxey situation in Philadelphia
Correct.
is like, yo, that young man took that opportunity and ran
And
with it,
ran with it.
and
And
he,
ran with it.
and he got paid, and he deserves every dime that he got.
Correct. Correct. Oh, and people have heard it here first, right? Something that I think they need to put on the line at stake in that in season tournament, right? The
Hmm.
winner of that in season tournament should automatically get a 1 through 6 bid in the playoffs, regardless. They should put that on the line as the motivation to win that in season tournament.
I don't think they will. And the reason why I say it is this because you look at it, you look at the Lakers last year. The Lakers
Mhm.
went they went hard, okay, for that in-season tournament. And then what happened right after
It was a big letdown.
right. And it
And
wasn't
for Indiana, too,
right. And it wasn't like they didn't crank it back up until the postseason. And then they had to fight scrap and claw just to get into the playing
into the
tournament.
play-in.
Yeah, because Houston put that pressure on LA and Golden State last year. So that's why I don't think the NBA would do that. I mean, they had to like incentivize that tournament, and I'm sure they're going to incentivize like other things, because of the quality of their product that's being put out there in the regular season because there's a lot of money that has been gifted to them. And I say gifted from the standpoint that it's like, these networks have put up the money and they want to see, said
A
product. I
great
mean,
product.
nobody nobody wants to see the G League affiliate of the Knicks take on the G League affiliate of the Mavericks, you know, on a 3:30 Sunday afternoon game on ABC. They're not
Correct.
paying for that. If they pay for Lakers, I mean, if they pay for Mavs Knicks, they want to see Brunson going at it with Doncic, Kyrie going at it, X, Y,
Mm-hmm.
that that
Very
that's
true.
that's what they want to see. But I do believe that we are in store for a tremendous season. But as always, before signing off, the floor is yours if you want to, go out there because you're doing a lot of, great stuff, that a lot of people do not know about. So if you want to go out there, take this opportunity to put some of that stuff out there, some of the projects that you're working on, please let the folks know, man.
So we have a sitcom coming soon, and I'm thinking BET Plus. So I have a sitcom called Lot Patrol coming soon. Of course, if you want to hear me talking basketball, all things NBA, Brothers Talking NBA Basketball podcast is where you can find me on YouTube, on TikTok, at Ernest_Dancy on Instagram, where I'm also posting clips from Brothers Talking NBA Basketball podcast. And of course, when I'm linking up with Will and we're going back and forth and we're talking about the ins and outs of all things NBA. Yeah, those are the places in which I can be found.
Well, listen, man, as always, it was a pleasure. And like I said, we're gonna be doing this real soon because I know, like, I mean, the season starts. I'm looking at the calendar over here in about a week or so, give or take. I guarantee you by Thanksgiving, one of us is gonna be hitting up the other one like, yo, we need to talk about something,
Exactly.
something
Exactly.
that just transpired. But folks, if you like what you saw or and heard on this podcast, please feel free to like and subscribe to this channel. Ernest has given you all of his platforms. Definitely, if you have not already, please go out here and show this brother some love because he deserves it and then some. Um, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 pounds of sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. It's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Brother Ern, as always, it was truly an honor and a pleasure. I definitely appreciate every single thing that you and I talked about last night. This was some good old stuff, man. Good old fashioned stuff, man. I definitely
Definitely.
appreciate it. And for all you folks out there, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off and saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.